Men, we are about to be looking back at the first quarter of the 21st century. Has that slapped you in the face yet? We've come a long way since the year 2000 in the gun, tactics, ballistics world. We're going to talk about some of those changes today, looking back at the first half of the 21st century. So gather around, old salty veterans, grizzled mustached law enforcement officers, young tactical kids, boomers and zoomers alike. If you're into guns, you might like this episode. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host. Military law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooting, hunting background, bullet points in the show notes. Now, I have been into guns since before the year 2000. In the year 2001, I joined the Marine Corps, pre-9/11. But it just so happened that 9/11 happened right around the turn of the new millennium. And this would begin a major protracted hot war. I believe the longest hot war we've ever had. Nothing to take away from the spies and pilots and things that died in the Cold War. That was a mostly Cold War. That's why it's called the Cold War. And if you don't count like the war on drugs, like an actual physical hot war, I do believe the war on terror, the GWOT, the Global War on Terror, was the longest hot war we've ever had. I took part in that war, for better or worse. And it shaped the world that we live in, the culture that we live in, and it shaped the guns and tactics that we use. It is the major defining factor as it lasted almost the entirety of the first quarter of the 21st century. Some major things came out of that. We saw a return to the use of body armor. Now in Nam, which was before my time and things like that, they had flak jackets. In fact, when I first joined, we still had flak jackets. But very soon after, we went back to armor, body armor. So we see the mass proliferation of body armor once again coming back from the medieval times to modern times. And you might take that for granted, but if you were around then, like when I went to boot camp, we didn't wear body armor. The guys in Nam didn't wear body armor. They had flak jackets, but that's not the same thing. Hard armor. And we've seen that evolve. We've seen it get more affordable, more prevalent, more mobile, better over the generations. The first stuff we had in the GWOT was pretty terrible. It was like a tactical Ninja Turtle. Slightly better than getting shot in the chest, having to wear that stuff. Stuff we have now is better. Major advancement. Also, not so much trickled down to the civilian, but armored vehicles. When we first started the GWOT, we just rolled around in regular Humvees. They hadn't yet figured out how to make IEDs. They figured it out pretty quick. We had to adapt and have armored vehicles. Another thing, we didn't really have standard mounting devices for optics and night vision and lights and lasers and all the accessories that come along with the firearms. The basic firearm itself hasn't really changed. It's still, until the majority gets replaced with the M7, it's still the M16 variants, right? The M16A1, the M16A2, A4, the M4. Those are all basically the same operating system, maybe some slight variations, but as far as the weapon itself, it's the same. But what changed dramatically was the common use of mounting accessories. When I first went to war, it was an M16A2 with regular circle handguards and a regular stock and regular good old iron sights. We qualified with that out to 550 yards, 500 meters. Iron sights. Regular forehand, and we had the old green parade slings, the web slings, 2-point slings, like you would throw over your shoulder like a Continental soldier. That's what we had. We didn't have tack slings. We didn't have anything like that. We quickly adopted the Picatinny rail. I think that's named after the Picatinny Arsenal. Somewhere in Yankeeville, somewhere in the Northeast. I don't know. I don't keep up with Yankee stuff. But got to hand it to the Yankees for coming up with the pick rail. That quickly became adopted, and that is in so much that we do today. We just take for granted that I can get a gun and it's probably going to have a pick rail or probably going to have M-lock to mount pick rail. I can buy a menagerie of accessories to mount onto a gun. We just kind of take that for granted. Year 2000, that wasn't even a thing. You have to get some specialty bracket that clamped onto your trigger guard to mount a red laser on your handgun. You ever go look at the original, and I don't often quote Hollywood because most of it's stupid, but you ever see that stupid gun that the Terminator pulls out in that shop with a giant laser on it? That's the tech we were dealing with. But very quickly that evolved to an easy system. At first it was the quad rail and then the M-LOK system. You can take and mount a white light. That's major. By kicking down doors with a mini mag light in your hand and an M16. I know it sucks because I've been there. There are techniques to do it, wrapping your arm underneath the magazine well and shining your light and trying not to get shot in the process. It's doable. It's miserable. We take for granted the advancement of the pick rail. And I don't know if we'd have had that without the GWAT. I don't know if we just saw the mass proliferation of it. That's a giant leap forward. The ability to, I've got a basic M4-ish type AR-15. I want to put an LPVO on it, right? Before that, you had some weird gooseneck apparatus to mount on top of the iron sights with the carry handle, and then it was really high, height over bore, and it wasn't very secure, and it hung up way too far. That's what you were dealing with. Now I can just get an M4 type thing. I can mount a carry handle on it if I want. I can take the carry handle off. I can put on an LPVO. I can be like, you know what, I just want to run a red dot. And then I'm like, you know what, I want to run a red dot and a magnifier. I can do all that because I got a pick rail on it. I can put a light on it. I can put whatever on it. That's a big deal. I don't think that should be overlooked. Let's go to law enforcement. I was also a law enforcement officer after I got out of the Marine Corps, I'd say mid-2000s. L.A.P.D. And right around this time, we see a major shift. There was semi-autos coming into vogue in the 90s, but really, you were kind of at an even split, I'd say, in the 90s. And going into the 2000s, we see a major shift where pretty much everybody is running a semi-auto. Despite what post-apocalyptic zombie TV shows would have you believe, pretty much everybody is running semi-autos. And the early semi-autos, the early Smith & Wesson 5906s, the Beretta 92s, and even the early Glocks. Now, there wasn't a lot else out there. H&K USPs, right? But we look at the explosion of the handgun market in the U.S., and that's not really fueled by the military so much. It's not really fueled by law enforcement so much. It's fueled by civilians and that innovation. Part of that is the mass proliferation of concealed carry in America. We might think, everybody's after our guns and our rights, and there are certain people that are. But we saw a major, major improvement in concealed carry liberty in the United States in the 2000s. And we should not take that as a small victory. That's a major victory that in almost every state, except for some really infringement, nasty states like California, New Jersey, but most places, most Americans that want to can carry a handgun on them day to day in their everyday life. It wasn't the case in the year 2000. A lot of states didn't even have really a process for concealed carry. It wasn't really a thing. Then you had to choose between a J-frame and a Walther PPK. And I'm oversimplifying it where there were some other options, but there weren't a lot. You look at the number and variety of good carry handguns today, from Micro 9s, which I'm not a big fan of, Baby 380s, which I'm not a big fan of, all the way up to full-size fighting handguns, which I am a big fan of. But the variety is mind-boggling. Sometimes it's just your biggest problem is analysis by paralysis. But that's a big deal that you have so many good handguns to choose from. And that's a lot to do with Americans actually carrying handguns. Handguns were a thing in America before that. Like, a lot of people had revolvers or 1911s, but nothing like after the mass proliferation of concealed carry in America. Go look at a map and see how many states had concealed carry in 2000 versus how many have them today. I believe only one state had constitutional carry then. A lot of states have constitutional carry today. Talking about handguns, in the year 2000, it was a big jockeying position, like the Kentucky Derby. You had 3 horses, really, maybe 4 horses. Oh yeah, throw a wild card in there. I don't really know how horse racing works, but they were jockeying for first place, right? They were right there neck and neck. Who was going to be the predominant American handgun caliber? The .45 ACP, the old war horse, the F.B.I.'s Wunderkind of the .40 Smith & Wesson, SIG's high-speed drag racer, the .357 SIG, or the humble old German Imperial Army, oldest of the pack, 9mm. Yeah, it's even older than the .45 ACP. And of course, now looking back, we know that the 9mm pretty much won. It is the standard de facto handgun caliber of our time. Like it or hate it, it is. And it's a good round. But in the 2000s, there was a lot of rounds jockeying for that. The 9mm head and shoulders above the rest. You can still get the other rounds, but they are a tiny fraction of the handgun ammunition market. The .40 Smith & Wesson's on life support. The .357 SIG is a cliff note. The .45 ACP still has a dedicated but very small minority following compared to the 9mm. And that's pretty much been hashed out in the first quarter of the 21st century in America. Talking about handguns and the 9mm, a lot of that has to do with improvement in hollow point technology. That is a big one. Hollow points were in their infancy. They were around, you had like the dum-dum bullet that were used in the old Enfields and stuff like that. But as far as like good handgun expanding projectiles that were reliable at expansion and had a good balance of penetration and expansion, that was in its infancy in the new millennium too. But we've come a long way in the use of, availability of, dependability of hollow point ammunition for civilians and law enforcement. That's a major improvement. And I don't approve of everything that the F.B.I. does because I study history. But one of the cool things they gave us was F.B.I. ballistics gel testing. Tip of the hat for that. But the fact that you can look at a pretty set standard of parameters, how far does it go in ballistics gel? How far does it go through 4 layers of denim? How well does it do through auto glass? That's a little bit better scientifically than shooting wet phone books. It's not the best. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not the end-all be-all. I still say go for a round that has good proven track record on the street, has good street cred. And there's plenty of those. But a good starting point is the F.B.I. ballistics gel test. It's better than shooting wet newspapers. If that's all you have, then that's better than nothing. But it's better than shooting wet newspapers. It's better than shooting, pine lumber, which was one of the old tests. Right? It's better than all that. So that's a big deal. The fact that we can have repeatable, actual science, not like COVID vaccine science, but like actual proven data that's observable, repeatable, provable. And we have those parameters for handgun ammunition. That's a big deal. Now, there's gray area in ballistics, and bullets can do weird things, and you can deliver a great shot, and it might not have the intended effect. I'm totally aware of that. But the fact that you can be confident loading up a good, proven track record hollow point in your carry gun, assuming you've done all the work to know that it cycles in your gun when fired by you and it's reliable, and it shoots point of aim, point of impact, and it's going to expand out of your barrel length, and all those caveats. You can, if those boxes are checked, have a reasonable expectation that those hollow points are going to perform well. Whether it's a Spear Gold Dot or a Federal HST or a Winchester Ranger or Remington Golden Saber, there's a bunch, right? But if they're a good premium, good proven track record round, you have a reasonable expectation that they're going to do well. Despite what some might have you believe, that's a lot better than your old, 148 grain or 158 grain 38 Special Plus P wad cutters. Those will work in a pinch, but a good modern semi-auto with good modern expanding hollow point ammunition is better. Newsflash. Spoiler alert, it's better than the old revolvers. And I like old revolvers. I have revolvers. But nostalgia is not worth me risking my wife's life to a greater degree because I want to carry something nostalgic day to day. I carry what's practical. And we've had giant leaps in expandable ammunition. That's a big deal. And the biggest one, there's that saying, never forget. I don't know what, the Alamo, whatever. Never forget the assault weapons ban that I grew up under. I'm old enough and have been into guns that when I got into guns, there was an assault weapons ban. You were limited to 10-round magazines nationwide. Blech. Talk about infringement. Thankfully, we're rid of that crap, and hopefully it doesn't come back in the entire rest of the 21st, 22nd, or 23rd centuries, assuming Christ doesn't return before then, and we still have an America with a constitution. Never forget that we had an assault weapons ban here, and it was in place in the 2000s, right? In the first part of the 21st century. We had a nationwide ban on most modern guns. If you wanted a normal magazine in your handgun, you had to dig around for they were even stamped like law enforcement only or pre-ban 15-round magazine for your Beretta 92. Garbage. You couldn't just buy an AR-15. It just wasn't a thing. They were banned. Or pick, if you're an AK guy, right? Don't forget about that. And don't think that without vigilance, it can't return. So we've come a long way in a lot of ways in the first quarter of the 21st century. I think it's important to look back at history. One, because I love history. Obviously, I like guns, do this podcast. Understanding history is important for its own sake, but it's also important so that we look back and hopefully don't repeat some of the mistakes of the past. This is just a small taste. There's probably many other things we could get into. But I thought this would be a good one to come out on New Year's. I don't know if I'm going to put it out New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, but happy second quarter of the 21st century, gunfighters. With that, your tactical verse of the day. Then David lifted his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven, having in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.